Okay, well, good evening, everybody. A very warm welcome to our June 3rd Thursday lecture here at the Sainsbury Institute for the Study of Japanese Arts and Cultures. It is a beautiful afternoon here. We're looking forward to the summer solstice, of course, tomorrow. But we've got lovely sunshine and the miserable weather that we've all been enduring for the last few weeks hopefully is giving way to something a little bit brighter over the next little while. It's been an exciting little time for us here at the Sainsbury Institute. We're in the middle of celebrating our 25th anniversary since being established through the generosity of our founding benefactors, Sir Robert and Lady Lisa Sainsbury. And we had a week in late May. I think many of you were able to join us for some of those activities. We had some exhibitions in the Forum Millennium Library here in Norwich, and we also welcomed some chanting Buddhist priests from Hasedera in Nara, who brought with them their 12-meter high image of the Kannon Bosatsu. Some unforgettable moments in there, and very grateful to my colleague Olivia Butler for providing such a wonderful report in our June e-bulletin that I hope you've all had a chance to have a look at. We're looking forward to more exciting events through July, and we've got two exhibitions. The first is Hokusai, A Vision Above, which will be at the Wells Maltings up on the North Norfolk coast from the 5th to the 13th of July, with an associated symposium on Saturday the 13th. And please do come and join us for that if you can. We've got some great speakers lined up for the day. And then the following week, we're back in Norwich at the old shoe factory and St Mary's Works with an exhibition called Hokusai Art Beyond Boundaries and Tanzaku. And if you don't know what Tanzaku are, you need to know. And a good way to find out would be to come along and see what's going on between the 17th and the 25th of July, especially because we've got some associated demonstrations and tea ceremonies that you are very welcome to join us for as well. And those of you who are close to Norwich, very welcome to join us for a private view of the exhibition on the 17th of July at the Shoe Factory. We just ask that you send an RSVP through to us at the normal email address of sysjack@sainsburyinstitute.org. Next month, we'll be back in our regular hostelry, so our formerly regular slot in the hostelry, in the Cathedral Hostelry. But this evening, it's a particular pleasure to welcome our speaker. We're online tonight. I had a really interesting conversation with Douglas Brooks a couple of months ago when we first became aware of his amazing work on boat building in Japan and the incredible access that he's had to little known areas of knowledge and practice, I think it would be fair to say, in the Japanese traditional craft world. Douglas is going to be speaking to us on ways of learning an apprentice boat builder in Japan. Now, Douglas is a very accomplished boat builder in his own right, and he's also a writer and researcher, specializing in the construction of traditional wooden boats for museums and private clients. He recently advised on traditional boat building for the very popular Disney Plus series Shogun, based on James Clavell's amazing novel, of course, from the 1970s. And he was a Japanese boat consultant on that show. So there's a nice plug there. If you haven't seen it, it's well worth sitting down and doing some binge viewing if you get the chance. Douglas's boats have been displayed at museums across both the United States and Japan. And since 1990, he's been researching traditional Japanese boat building, focusing on the techniques and design secrets of the craft. And we're hoping he might reveal a few of those secrets to us this evening. Douglas was the sole non-Japanese person listed in a 2003 Nippon Foundation survey of craftsmen capable of building traditional Japanese boats. That shows what a very rare set of skills he's now got. And indeed, in 2014, this was recognized when he received the Rare Craft Fellowship Award for his work from the American Craft Council. And in 2015, he was named as an Arts in Action Japan Fellow by the Asian Cultural Council of New York. Douglas has published widely on Japanese boat building, 5 books and counting, and his 2015 volume, Japanese Wooden Boatbuilding, chronicles his first 5 apprenticeships with elderly boat builders from throughout Japan. So this evening, we're looking forward to Douglas exploring his personal experiences of the apprenticeship system in Japanese crafts, having worked with no less than 9 boat builders during more than 25 years. From an insider's perspective, he's going to discuss the nuances of the system, its importance in maintaining and keeping alive traditional Japanese crafts, and the threat posed by the absence of a new generation of apprentices. The talk will run till about 7 o'clock, followed by a question and answer session of around 10 to 15 minutes. If on the bottom of your screen, you are very welcome to enter your questions at any time, either during or after the talk, in the Q&A box. And you can see that hopefully at the bottom of your screen at the moment. And the chat box is also available for general comments to the hosts. Without any further ado, I'm going to pass over to Douglas, who tells me there's a thunderstorm rumbling around in the background. But Douglas, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank you, Simon, and your Olivia, and all your staff and the Sainsbury Institute for allowing me to give this talk. Welcome to everybody, and I look forward to questions at the end, but we'll jump right into it. First, looking at Great. So yeah, quick map of Japan. This map shows the location of my 9 apprenticeships, as well as major boat building projects I've done for museums and arts festivals in Japan. So luckily and very consciously, I've tried to study in a wide geographic range because boat styles and technologies change, and the way craftsmen work changes as you move around Japan. Boats of Okinawa, for instance, are really completely different than native Japanese boats. So that's a quick look at where I've been. As Simon mentioned, I've had 9 teachers, and all my teachers were in their 70s and 80s when I worked with them. And it's important to point out that I'm the sole apprentice for 7 of my 9 teachers. The first boat that I studied in Japan is this one. I like to think that I went to Japan to become a boat builder, and I became a barrel maker instead. This is the iconic Taraibune, or tub boat, found only on Sado Island in the Sea of Japan. And in 1990, on my first visit to Japan, I met there were 2 craftsmen at the time who were still building these boats. But by the time I came back in 1992 to further this research, one of them had passed away, and there was only 1 craftsman left. The traditional Sado Island fishing boat, they're visible in blue. These are very interesting boats. If this is a younger audience, generally they recognize them from the famous animated film Spirited Away, where the heroine escapes from an island in a tugboat. And Miyazaki-san, the creator of that film, actually did a remarkable job getting every detail right about these boats. But these boats were first introduced or first discovered, invented in Japan in the late 1800s after a massive earthquake lifted the shoreline of Sado Island, and it revealed what you can see behind in this picture. This sharp volcanic bottom was lifted above sea level, and it created an entirely new coastline that was rich in shellfish and seaweed, which are the primary catch for these boats, but is too treacherous. The stones are too sharp and the channels are too narrow for a conventional boat to navigate. And so someone got the idea of using a barrel as a boat. These boats, because they were introduced later, are traditionally used by women. And so it also changed the sociology of the fishing communities of that region, because now suddenly mom left the house or the fields and joined her husband on the ocean. So this woman is using a long bamboo spear to catch, actually she's got wakame, she's got seaweed in the boat, and that wooden box has a glass bottom, and she can look down and capture things off the bottom. And that's the way these boats are used. In one village, the men put outboard motors, and for some reason, it's only men that use these tugboats in this village. And they mount outboard motors on their tugboats. But notice how they steer them. They use the sculling paddle at the bow, and you'll see one of those bamboo spears is laying across the gunwale of the boat, and a couple other bamboo spears are being towed behind the boat. But also another view of that volcanic foreshore. My teacher, after meeting him in 1990, I went back in 1992 and 1994 with an interpreter. I did not speak Japanese really at the time, to try to do a series of oral interviews, because I realized sort of the preciousness of his situation, being the last living builder of these boats. But what I discovered, to my frustration, was that Mr. Fuji really couldn't talk about his craft. And whenever I would ask a question, he would insist we go out to the workshop, and he said he would show me. And there were a lot of limitations that came right to the surface immediately with my attempts to do some documentation work with him with a tape recorder and a pad and paper and pencil. And I began to realize that the only way to really document this craft was to get inside it as an apprentice. And at the end of my visit in 1994, Mr. Fuji must have been thinking the same thing, because he invited me to come back and build the tugboat with him. I might point out that the average boat building apprenticeship in Japan historically was 6 years. And in my case, I am with my teachers for the time it took to build one, or in one case, two boats. And so that ranged from 2 weeks in the case of Mr. Fuji and the tugboat to 7 months with my teacher in Tokyo. But here he is, just kind of the classic Japanese workshop, sitting on the floor. The workbench is just a beam of wood. He's checking the shape of a stave for the tugboat with a pattern. No drawings whatsoever, all the dimensions memorized. And again, this points to how crucial it is to write these things down, someone to write these things down before they're lost. Actually, Hokusai has a beautiful woodblock print that shows a cooper doing this exact thing, which is and actually in the Hokusai print, the sides of the barrel frame Mount Fuji. But here we are with these photos are taken during my apprenticeship, working alongside Mr. Fuji. It is classic Japanese barrel making, though the tugboats are oval in shape and they have a slightly rounded bottom. It was very interesting. Mr. Fuji was a third generation cooper. His grandfather and his father and he had worked in the cooperage at the Marudai miso factory, where they built these enormous wooden tubs for fermenting soybean paste. But it's interesting, at age 50, Mr. Fuji retired from the cooperage and decided to build tugboats, and actually told me that he didn't feel confident building them, and he actually apprenticed with an older craftsman, somebody in his 70s, who was sort of the preceding generation of tugboat builder. Here, this is the most complicated and difficult part of building tugboats and Japanese barrel making. It's the braided bamboo hoops that hold the tubs together. We cut 50 to 60 foot madake, timber bamboo, to very strict specifications, including an ancient zodiac, which governed which days of the week we could cut and harvest the bamboo, then split the stalks 4 ways, then using the hatchet, split them again. So we got 8 50 to 60 foot long strips. You shape the strips. Notice Mr. Fuji's holding the draw knife with his foot, and he's got a little bamboo fence in his hand. Um, and then you begin to braid into hoops. And this is an enormously challenging thing to learn, because Mr. Fuji, like all my teachers, did not slow down for my benefit at all. In fact, there was no explanation whatsoever of any technique. All of my teachers explained to me on the first day of my apprenticeship that there would be absolutely no speaking in the workshop. And this was an absolute shock to me, but it set the hairs on the back of my neck straight up. And I realize in retrospect, that's exactly what it's intended to do. And as I like to explain to people, in the Japanese apprentice pedagogy, the teacher does not teach, but the apprentice is required to learn. And so what one does, and this is a partial explanation for the long 6-year apprenticeship, it is not about efficiency. But those first 2 years, when you're sweeping and fetching and sharpening, you're watching your teacher. And that is how you're expected to learn. In my case, my teachers similarly started me by sweeping and then brought me into the actual work in the project. If I made a mistake, I was handed the broom. And I can tell you that creates a very powerful motivation to succeed. In this case here, I had the presence of mind. I brought a video camera with me to Japan, and my wife filmed Mr. Fuji braiding. And I left my apprenticeship. This was in 1996, and I did not. I had managed somehow to braid one of the 3 hoops. But I left. I could have never braided another one. And I went home to the United States. I sat in front of my television set and my VCR, that dates me and anyone who knows what those things are, with plastic strapping. And I watched and rewound and watched and rewound that tape probably 100 times, and I figured out how to braid hoops. And in a sense, I replicated in front of the television set 2 or 3 years of a traditional apprenticeship watching one's teacher. So there's Mr. Fuji with the hoops. It's really quite beautiful. It's really, without a doubt, the rarest craft or skill that I possess. At this point, I don't think there's more than 24 craftspeople in Japan that know how to braid barrel hoops. So in 1999, my teacher tragically died in an accident, and a foundation on the island approached me and said, "You were his only student. Now we have a crisis. What can we do?" And what I said was, "We'll do the traditional thing, and I will train an apprentice." And then we will do, and here I am with a local carpenter, and he and I built 2 tugboats together with the support of the Kodo Bunka Zaidan and the Nippon Zaidan of Tokyo. Kodo is the world's most famous taiko drumming group, and they live communally on Sado Island. So they're great supporters of the traditional culture of Sado Island. So this is Mr. Taka Higuchi. So he and I built 2 tugboats together, and then we did the non-traditional thing, the very Western thing, and published my first book. And this is in English and Japanese, The Tugboats of Sado Island, A Japanese Craftsman's Methods. And this is simply, there's a foreword by a Sado Island historian that sort of sets the cultural, sociological background of the tugboat. But the rest of the book is a straight up how-to. And in fact, in the wake of my teacher's death, the Sado Board of Education found a barrel maker who taught a series of tugboat building workshops, and I was very proud of the fact they used my book as their textbook. These are my drawings. These are the first, and maybe I think the only measured drawings of a Japanese tugboat. And one thing about my drawings, because there's so much secrecy in the craft, that's a primary reason that many boat builders don't use any drawings, because they don't want to take the risk of writing something down and having it stolen. So they memorize all the dimensions. I record in my drawings only the dimensions that the boat builder actually uses. Okay, so I don't apply Western naval architecture to, and this will become clearer with another boat drawing that I'll show you. I don't apply any outside standards of naval architecture. These are the dimensions that work. You can build a tugboat with the same dimensions my teacher used. And so that's what I record, because every boat builder has a different system. And in my view, that's as much a cultural artifact that deserves preservation as anything else, as the boats and the techniques themselves. The dimensions you're seeing are in shaku. Traditional Japanese craftsmen don't use the metric system. I have yet to meet a boat builder that uses the metric system, and other traditional crafts refuse to use the metric system. So the shaku is one shaku. It's a decimal system. One shaku is divided into 10 sun, which is divided into 10 bu. So shaku sun bu. And for me as an American, I don't know about you folks, but shaku is a really easy scale to transfer between, because one shaku is 11 and 15/16 inches. So one shaku is a tiny bit less than a foot. And since I work in feet and inches here in the United States, just very, very easy for me to understand. And then thanks to my wife, this, reading from left to right, is the step-by-step on how to braid the barrel hoops. I did finally, 4 years after apprenticing on Sado Island, I did get to build a conventional Japanese boat. This photo was taken in the mid-1960s in Urayasu, which is the city just east of Tokyo. It's now essentially a suburb of Tokyo. This is the Sakai River, and when this photo was taken, you're looking at some of 1,700 registered fishing boats, all wood, that operated out of Urayasu and fished on Tokyo Bay, which was one of the richest fishing grounds in all of Japan. This all came crashing to an end by the early 1970s. A series of chemical spills poisoned the fishing grounds. The fishermen had to shut down. Developers bought the rights to the fishing ground and began to fill it in. And the current shoreline on Tokyo Bay in Urayasu is over 2 miles beyond its historic shoreline. And if you look out over that former fishing ground, what you see is Magic Mountain and Tokyo Disneyland, which is in Urayasu City. So this amazingly rich culture of fishing and wooden boats and boat building evaporated nearly overnight. I was fortunate enough to meet one of the last boat builders in Urayasu. He told me that at its height, there were 6 what he called boat building houses, and the boat builders were generally related to one another, so they were a family-based business, and he ran one of them and was of course put out of business by this ecological disaster. But I was fortunate enough that when Urayasu built a brand new folk history museum, which I highly recommend, it's a small museum, but it's a really excellent collection, and it's a great collection of boats, by the way, since that was just the lifeblood of the community. They created Japan's first museum boat shop. And Mr. Utagawa was invited to build a traditional seaweed gathering boat as part of the opening of the exhibition. And to my complete surprise, he said to the museum, "I will only do so if I teach the American." And so with 3 weeks notice, the museum contacted me, and I grabbed my bag and I flew to Japan. So here is Mr. Utagawa watching me like a hawk as I use the Japanese ripsaw to fit planks together. This is a copy of Mr. Utagawa's lines drawing, and we'll talk a little bit about a drawing here. The upper half of the drawing shows the profile of the boat. So you can see from left to right, there's the stem, the bow of the boat, the curvature of the planks, and then you actually see the expanded transom to the right. And then the bottom half of the drawing is the plan view, the aerial view, which shows only the bottom of the boat, the shape of the bottom of the boat. But Olivia, real quick, is my cursor visible to the people watching?
Yep, absolutely fine.
Great. So that gives me a pointer. But so that's the bottom plan view of the bottom of the boat, which in profile is this line through here. But we don't see the plan view of the chine or the shear. So the drawing is incomplete. And the reason for this is to protect the boat builder's secrets. So one of the great ironies is Japanese maritime museums have thousands of these drawings, and you can't build a boat from most of them because essential information is missing. And now I'll show you my drawing of the same boat. And here you see the two missing lines. And so now you know the overall width of the boat, which you didn't know before, and the width of the boat at the chine. And so now you could build a proper replica of that boat from this drawing. A few other things in my drawing. My drawings are bilingual, Japanese and English. I give a lot of details. Again, these are all dimensions that Mr. Utagawa used. And over here, it's small, it's hard to read, but Mr. Utagawa used a formula to help him remember all the dimensions. And I record that formula. Here in the center are two patterns. That's angle of the stem, angle of the transom, and two angles for the side, for the first plank to the bottom. And we made those out of scrap wood. And Mr. Utagawa told me that every time he finished one of these boats, he burned those two patterns. And he made 300 of these boats in his career. So secrecy is absolutely baked into this craft. In fact, there's a very well-known phrase in Japanese, nusumi geiko, which means stolen lessons. And what that describes is the fact that if your master was not your mother or your father, then your master may not teach you everything. And therefore, the apprentice's final challenge was to steal their master's secrets. And most of my teachers, just under half my teachers were taught by family members and were taught everything. They were taking over the family business, but the rest did not, and they had to steal their master's secrets. Mr. Fuji told me he used to sneak into his master's workshop at night with a candle and study his layout. And Mr. Utagawa told me that he plied his master with lots of sake and would get him drunk and ask him questions, and was able to get the secrets that way. All kinds of really remarkable stories from craftspeople across all crafts, I think, about that phenomenon. Here is the seaweed boat. No benches, built on the shop floor. No use of clamps, or extremely limited use of clamps, unlike Western boat building. You use props. You hold everything overhead, to the side, to the floor, to hold things in place. And we'll talk a little bit about fastening here. One of the great differences between Japanese boat building and Western boat building is the fact that most boats have no frames. There's no internal framing. And so the planks are edge nailed against each other. And what you're seeing there, those are little mortises, little pockets. And there is a nail sent down that mortise to fasten to the plank below it on edge. And we'll show that a little clearer in a moment. The other central technique to Japanese boat building is soft fitting all the watertight seams. This is my teacher in Tokyo. A plank is on the brace to the floor, braced overhead, and he is using a special boat building saw and sawing, making pass after pass after pass, after each one, tapping the plank a little bit closer and sawing again, and eventually resolving a perfect watertight fit between those two planks. This technique is called suriawase. That's its most common name. Suru is to rub, awaseru is to put together. And so the technique is very highly refined. You begin with a normal sawing motion, and you finish with this horizontal rubbing motion. And yeah, it's really quite incredible, the fit that can be achieved with this. So you look at the two side planks, and you see that each of those planks is composed of 3 pieces of wood. All those seams are saw fit before assembly on the shop floor. And then once that strake is fully assembled out of its 3 parts, it's bent onto the boat. The nails are blacksmith made. They're flat steel. And because they're flat steel, you can't use a drill to pilot a hole, and you have to use a special set of chisels to make a rectangular hole to accommodate the nails. And that hilt, these are called tsuba nomi. Tsuba means hilt, nomi is chisel. That hilt is so after you drive that into the wood, you swing your hammer backwards and you pound, you can get the chisel back out. And that's a close-up. So the nail ultimately, when the adjoining plank is dropped down on this plank, that nail will come up here. The head of the nail will fetch up there in the base of the mortise, and the nail, of course, will exit that hole and into the adjoining plank to hold things together. And there's a cutaway. And I would also like to point out that's an offcut from a working plank, and then I carefully sawed it to reveal the nail. Please gaze upon the fit between those 2 planks. That's watertight with nothing else, no glue, no caulking, nothing. In Japan, only old boats, in most cases, only boats when they get old and begin to leak do Japanese use caulking. They're not caulked when new, typically. A bit more about apprenticeship. One day in Tokyo, my teacher surprised me. Again, I wasn't allowed to speak. I wasn't allowed to ask questions. Even when I did ask questions at break time, the 2 default answers were mate wakaru and mite wakaru, which mean wait and you will understand, or watch and you will understand. So really, again, the craftspeople work in a world devoid of language. It's an education of action, not discourse. Okay. And so one day my teacher surprised me and he said, I have to teach you something. And he's the only teacher I've had in Japan that actually said that to me. And he took this piece of wood and he sketched one of our planks, and he explained what he was trying to get, and he needed to derive a dimension. And then he said something cryptic to me. He said, if you don't understand this, you can't call yourself a boat builder. So needless to say, he had my attention. And he took out then he fell silent, took out his square and his ink line, and he drew these straight lines and drew this triangle intersecting them and derived this dimension. And when he was done, he looked at me and he said, did you understand that? And I said, no. And he shook his head and he got his plane out, and you can see where he planed to erase his lines. And without saying a word, he drew the same lines a second time, looked up at me and said, now do you understand it? And I said, no. And he put this plank down and he said, get back to work. And he never mentioned it again. And at lunch break, I grabbed this plank and I ran to the nearest convenience store and I slapped it on the copy machine. And I would get the copy out periodically. And about 2 years later, I figured this out. And this is in essence the Japanese apprentice pedagogy. Again, I'm reinforcing what I said before. The apprentice is on one's own. and the pressure is on, and the apprenticeship is a crucible, and you either pass or you fail. Um, and the teacher takes no responsibility for it. Uh, and it's a very powerful learning method, and it's something I'll talk about at the very end of the slide talk, how that's influenced my work subsequent. There's our Tokyo boat. If you go to Tokyo, the Freeman Foundation, a US-based foundation that funded this apprenticeship, they donated this boat to a group called Wasen Tomonokai, Friends of Traditional Japanese Boats, and they operate this boat and 5 or 6 other traditional boats in a canal in Tokyo, and they will teach you how to use the Japanese sculling oar. So go check it out and give yourself take yourself on a ride. The only real evidence of a revival of wooden boat building in Japan is in Okinawa. And about 20 to 25 years ago, yachtsmen and windsurfers and surfers kind of rediscovered the sabani, which is the traditional Okinawan fishing boat. And like really like what largely has fueled the revival of wooden boat building in Oceania, Europe, North America, and Scandinavia. Take traditional boats and turn them into pleasure boats. And so people in Okinawa started a race, Sabani. And at that time, there were only 3 elderly men left in the entire archipelago that could still build a traditional sabani. And in 2010, a Japanese woman apprenticed with one of them, and I apprenticed with another. And his story was interesting. He came of age at the end of where he was a teenager during the Battle of Okinawa. He actually lost his 2 older brothers in the battle. Lived on a little tiny island called Iejima, off the northwest corner of the main island of Okinawa. And his father was a fisherman, but he became a boat builder. And from the end of the war into the 1960s, he built wooden sabani. And by the end of the 60s, fiberglass boats had come in. I guess you call it glass fiber. The Japanese call it FRP, fiber reinforced plastic. In America, we call these boats fiberglass. And he just switched materials. He had to. And the sabani disappeared, really, or just sort of thrown away at the margins of harbors and so on. Before World War II, they were true dugouts. And post World War II, they became semi dugouts, and you'll see that in a moment. But when I first met him, one of the things he said to me was, when I was approached and commissioned to build sabani, I hadn't built a sabani in 35 years, and he said my first thought was, do I still remember all the dimensions? And he said he had built 4 different sizes of sabani, and there's 4. He got out 4 pieces of plywood, and he sketched his 4 designs, and he wrote down all his dimensions. Very, very interesting moment of a craftsperson documenting themselves. And I don't need to tell you, I grabbed these at lunchtime. I ran to the convenience store. I put them down on the copy machine and, save them for posterity. But Mr. Shimojo and I built an 8-meter sabani together. And here we are, the Okinawans build their boats upside down. Here we are bending the planks. These are 2 inches thick, 26 feet long, and we bent them over a 3-day period using temporary turnbuckles and spreader bars and so on. So Mr. Shimojo handled how to spread and squeeze while I just sprayed hot water on the planking. This is a bit out of sequence. This is a look at those 2 planks before we set them up to bend them. And what you're looking at, the planks are inside face up. These planks have been hollowed out. So follow my cursor. Full thickness at the gunnel, 2 inches thick, hollowed to half their thickness through the middle, then brought back to full thickness to create this ledge where the floorboards will eventually sit, then hollowed again to half their depth, and then quickly back to full thickness where they join the bottom. So really, just a remarkable, a remarkable amount of sculpting, carving in these boats. And then planks are bent, and then you drop this giant timber on and begin to fit that and shape that to form the bottom. There's a shot to the left. You see how the bottom has been sculpted out. That block remaining there is a mast step. And we use the chain fall overhead to periodically roll that over and bring it to the side planks and fit it. And then back again, trimming. One of the reasons I badly wanted to study Okinawan boat building is the fact that the Okinawans built their boats with no metal fastenings. They were fastened entirely with wooden dovetail keys. These are hardwood. The boat, like all the boats you've seen here, are made of Japanese cedar or sugi. And you see the seam between the two planks here in the middle of the dovetail key. And notice the pencil line. I carve the mortise to the pencil line at the four corners. I haven't finished. I actually go beyond the pencil line top and bottom because I want it to be, I don't want the fastening to hold the planks apart. But then I carve to just inside the pencil line here in the middle. Wrap your heads around this. When you drive in the hardwood dovetail keys, those act like four wedges and they squeeze those two planks together. Or their force is pulling those two planks together. And that's the magic of this technique. There goes the dovetail key, and this goes half the depth of the planking, and now you can see it. The entire seam between the bottom and the sides, that's a dovetail key, one shaku apart. Then we rolled the boat over. The boat's been treated with soybean oil. We roll the boat over, and staggered in between the outside fastenings, again, one shaku apart, is another set of dovetail keys. So it's fastened inside and out. There too is the incredible sculptural shape of these boats. These boats are just so beautiful. Because they're largely carved to shape. A view of the bow, and another little detail here. Notice the grain structure of the two side planks. These spikes, by the way, get trimmed off. Those two planks were side by side in the log. And that's called book matching. And you've probably seen that in a tabletop, where the beautiful grain pattern is sort of in a, double, like a butterfly wings. It mirrors oneself. That is very standard in Japanese boat building. And it wasn't until I came to Okinawa that I really understood why. First thing is, Japanese boat builders try to always orient their wood, the heartwood side to the outside. The heartwood side of the plank is more rot resistant, so that's what you put toward the water. But to book match them, the fact that those come out of the same log side by side, the reason for that is that given these two wide planks, 26 feet long, are being bent, if they came from non-symmetrical places in the log or two different logs, they wouldn't bend the same. And so Japanese boat builders, as they build a boat, they're constantly book matching the planking. And it is a tradition that you get a log to build a boat. So all the wood comes from the same log. I know in England you can purchase logs flitched on like that. Here in America, that's pretty much unknown. When I build a boat here, for all I know, the wood comes from a dozen different logs. But in Japan, that's really actually quite critical to ensure that both sides of the boat bend to the same radius. And then our launching, that's my teacher on the right. And this woman, she was 94 years old, lived on the island, and she was a Yuta. And in the Okinawan native religion, which is neither Shinto nor Buddhist, it's a matriarchal faith, and she did the traditional boat blessing. Though interestingly, all the motifs in front of her, the mochi, the salt, the rice, and the sake, all come straight out of Shinto boat launching ceremonies, but she insisted this had nothing to do with Shintoism. So I need to learn more about that. And now there are about 40 Sabani racing teams throughout Japan or throughout Okinawa, and they gather for a full summer season of racing. The big race is at the end of July. It's a 26-mile open ocean race from Zamami Island to Naha. And the boats are sailed and paddled in these races. And you can see looking down the shoreline, there's some old Sabani, the dark ones that have been restored, but lots of new Sabani. And there's really a revival here. And it's really a wonderful thing to see with more young people coming in to learn how to build the boats. And it's just, it's just great. I mean, that's it. You want to get people excited about something, turn it into a sport. So now moving on, this photo I took in northern Japan, Sanriku, Tohoku. This is where the tsunami struck in March of 2011. That coastline, and I have traveled, by the way, all 47 prefectures of Japan and most of Japan's coastlines looking for boats. That coastline had more wooden boats than any place in Japan. And they say the tsunami destroyed 90 to 95% of all boats. So in addition to the horrible loss of life, there was this devastating loss of material culture. So after the tsunami, I felt that this was an important place to do some documentation work. And I began talking to the last surviving boat builder of that region that I could find. And it took 4 years to raise the money. But in 2015, I went back and studied with this man, Hiroshi Murakami. And he and I, along with an apprentice I brought from the US, we watched him build one of these boats. And this is bending the bottom, 2 inches thick. In Asia, boat builders use an open fire. In the West, we tend to use steam to bend our wood. We propped it under the sills of his house, put the weights, the stones on one end, and it took about 90 minutes to get the proper bend. Again, an interesting moment. Mr. Murakami completely agreed with my efforts to try to document his work, but and he used no drawings whatsoever. He built entirely from memory. And one morning I noticed him, he took my bevel gauge, walked over to the wall of the shop, and put it up there, and then came back to the boat. And I went over to see what was going on, and there are all the angles necessary to build the boat, recorded on a beam in the shop. But what's interesting is that Mr. Murakami didn't point that out to me. So even as a documentarian, and even when a Japanese boat builder looks at me and says, sure, document my work, you're my last chance. There's no help. There's no, you as documentarian are left to your own devices. And I like to tell people that though this is an inefficient way to teach, it's a very values-based education. We in the West are obsessed with filling students with facts as quickly and efficiently as possible. And in Japanese crafts, no. What initially has to be created is the ethics of a craftsperson. And so 2 years of sweeping and fetching and sharpening and observing and honing your patience, your perseverance, your powers of observation, then you are ready to learn. And this was another example of that. Dirt floor shop, you see the use of props from every direction. Um, and then my teacher, he's sawing off the planks at the stern, and I saw him pull that dimension. There's the transom. Like a lot of Asian boats, the planks actually run past the transom. And he made a mark, and he cut the angle without any layout, went over to the other side, pulled the same mark, and it was clear that as he cut this side, he was lining the saw up with the previous angle, which begs the question, how did he derive this angle? Where did he get this from? Because he didn't do any layout. And the answer, I won't, in a live audience, I make people try to answer it, but we'll skip straight to the answer. That's how he got the first angle. So in Mr. Murakami's case, the information needed to build a boat is actually on the walls of the shop. And there you can see that. So as he was here, he lined his saw up with that mark on the wall. Got his angle. Launch day. Mr. Murakami was there was just a few local fishermen and his family and my apprentice and I. And the fisherman insisted Murakami-san give a speech. And I will quote to you verbatim the entire speech. He said, "Mr. Brooks understood 95% of how to build this boat. And I'm not going to tell him what the 5% is that he did not understand." So, by the way, if you travel to Japan, that northern coastline, Tohoku, is absolutely gorgeous. And the vestiges of the tsunami are still visible. It's almost unimaginable what happened there, but it is a beautiful, beautiful part of Japan and beautiful people. I really encourage you to visit there. It helps them, and you will not be disappointed. Moving on, this was my first freshwater boat. All the boats you've seen so far and others that I don't have time to show were all sea boats. This is the iconic cormorant fishing boat in Gifu on the Nagara River in central Japan. If you're not familiar with this, there's a 1,300-year history of the Japanese in select spots, Gifu here being by far the most famous spot of using birds, cormorants, to fish. And there's a bird silhouetted in the firelight with a leash that restricts its neck. And the fisherman has about half a dozen of these birds. The fire attracts the ayu, what we call the little sweet fish in English. The birds dive, they get them, and they can't swallow them. They're pulled back aboard the boat, and the catch is squeezed out of the bird's gullet. There was a real crisis here. The last builder of these boats was in his mid-80s, and in 2017, I got a research grant that allowed me to go build a cormorant boat with him. The first time I met him, I asked him if he used drawings, and he pointed to these, and he said, "Those are my drawings." And I said, "What are those?" And he said, "Well, I have one of those for each type of boat I built. And that's it. That's the only documentation. Nothing else is written down or recorded in any way." And so again, this points to my work, which is somebody has to show you how to use this for this to make any sense. So I'll let you ponder this. But this is my teacher, Mr. Nasu-san. And I'm going to show a video here. I think you'll find it entertaining, but I want you to watch carefully. He's going to put a nail in as a demonstration. And right before he puts the nail in, he passes it through his mouth. and he insisted that I lick every single nail, and there were almost 1,000 nails in this boat. So don't miss the licking, and then enjoy what follows. So that technique of playing a rhythm while nailing is something about a third of Japanese boat builders do. It's a charming name for it. It's called Uguisu no Tani Watari, which means the bush warbler crosses back and forth across the valley. And the Japanese bush warbler makes multiple nests and is famous for this kind of frenetic life. So the song of the bush warbler is evocative of a kind of an echoing, noise. And Japanese boat builders who do this insist that because you're edge nailing, you're at great danger of splitting the planking. In this case here, we're nailing the bottom of the cormorant boat together. And so they say you need to drive the nail slowly and with control. And so that's why they do it. To the other 2/3 of Japanese boat builders who don't do this, they think this is bunk. They know about it, but they think it's silly. I also think that boat builders do this because it's fun. As simple as that. It's just it breaks up the monotony of the workshop. It's fun to do. It's creative. And so you either do it or you don't do it. Everybody seems to love this. I'm just show a very different style. Whoops, nope. Here we go. So as you can see, good enough to dance to. That was a group of visiting high school students. I want to move on. Okay, so here's our cormorant boat. River boat builders tend to, in addition to props, they use giant river boulders to hold the structure in place. So our boat has transoms, peaked transoms, bow and stern. And the use of these, we call these dogs in America. I'd be curious to know if they have a different name in England, but these staples. And these are Japanese boat builders use these, and carpenters too, in incredibly creative ways as clamps. And there's our finished boat, 42 feet long, all hand planed, all finished by hand, inside and out. These are all the nails. Like I say, almost 1,000 nails, and then just no frames inside, just a single beam amidships. 42 feet, a single beam amidships. Find me a naval architecture the architect who will tell you that that's even possible. So these are a very extreme boat. Yeah. And launch day. On the Nagara River, it is believed that a boat capsized 3 times at launching will never capsize again. And so here, this is the new owner, my Japanese apprentice, myself, and my American apprentice, and we're bringing the boat over for the first roll. I'm wrapping up now. I have developed both a 1-week workshop in Japanese boat building, but also a university class. Um, this is a class I taught last year at Harvard University, and my class is really about apprentice pedagogy. But what we do collectively is we build a Japanese boat together. And I try as hard as I can, as much as I can, to create a completely silent workshop. So this class is conducted in silence. And it's about 40 hours of workshop time. And then we do a more conventional discussion sessions outside of the workshop where we have readings, the students write papers, they keep a journal and reflections, and so on. I've taught this now at 5 different American universities, and I would love to do it. I would love to do it in England. Imagine that. So if any of you have any interest in my teaching, by all means, please reach out to me. So we'll just enjoy some views of, this was 12 students from both Harvard and MIT. Whoops. None of my students have any woodworking experience, which is fine. That's how an apprentice enters the craft. But we use only traditional Japanese hand tools, traditional boat building tools. We do a Shinto launching ceremony. All ceremonies around boat building in Japan are Shinto based. So the motifs here are the tools, which we're going to venerate. There's a bottle of sake, there's salt, there's mochi, there's rice, and various other things evoking nature. And then in the boat, we have an alcove, a funadana, in which we put shrine objects. And the very typical shrine objects in Japan, it varies from fishing village to fishing village, but some typical ones are the goen, the 5 yen coin, the dice. And the dice have to be oriented in a very particular way. And here, white paper wrapping some rice grains. So those are 3 really common shrine objects in Japan, but I invite my students to find something that's meaningful for them. And in this case at Harvard, they kind of did an origami and they all signed it. And this is a piece of wampum. This is a piece of shellfish, and this is to honor the Native Americans who once lived in where Cambridge, Massachusetts, Boston is now, honoring the original people of that place. And the happy class. That I'm going to wrap up very quickly. I promise. I just got back from Japan, did a large project. I built 6 brand new 36-foot river boats for a downriver tour company in Kumamoto Prefecture that lost their entire fleet to major flooding in 2020. Had to wait out COVID, get work visas, get lumber, but it was really quite a project. I think this was the biggest wooden boat building project in Japan since Japan's last replica ship was built in 2006. So there's 3 of the boats underway in my workshop in Kagawa Prefecture. And then there they are delivered. One of the boats delivered to the client and their rebuilt shoreside headquarters on the Kumagawa River in Kumamoto. As mentioned by Simon, I was the Japanese boat consultant for the Disney FX series Shogun. I contributed the designs and I did oversight on the design of the Japanese warship in the film. I stopped them from doing some things they were going to do that were really historically inaccurate. And then the final thing I did, I flew out to the movie set right before filming and I trained the extras in how to use the Japanese sculling oar. 30 extras. You can see them in the series proudly rowing, and they worked real hard and they did a great job. They really caught on to how to use the sculling oar. My major book, Japanese Wooden Boat Building, It's available from Amazon. And then my latest book also is available from Amazon. And I will stop only a few minutes late. Please forgive me. Thank you very, very much for watching me and not that sporting event.
Douglas, thank you so much. I mean, as you said, if you want to excite them, then turn it into a sport. And you've certainly excited me, and I'm sure everybody who's been listening this evening. Well, amazing boats. And I just think the whole thing that you've been building these yourself, the secret knowledge that you've been able to tap into, the stories you've been telling about working with all of those amazing teachers and the pedagogic techniques that they've been using. I think it's really interesting that you've been using that in your workshops as well. Many questions in my mind. It would be wonderful to have you come over and actually do some boat building with you. I'm just checking on the dates of the Henley Regatta here. So it's in about 2 weeks' time. Wouldn't it be cool to have some of these Japanese boats involved in that? Anyway, we have a number of questions for you. Perhaps if you bear with me, I'll read them out, and you can probably see them as well. But the first one is from an anonymous attendee who says, if secrecy was so important, how did the teachers feel about Mr. Brooks going to so many different boat builders and potentially sharing their craft secrets with his next master?
That is a very good question. I look back on it now and realize that I found these craftspeople at probably exactly the right time. As I mentioned, all my teachers were in their 70s and 80s when I worked with them. I believe if I had come 10 years to 20 years earlier, they would have thrown me out of their shops. But they had reached the point where they understood what was about to be lost. You know, my Tokyo teacher was a fourth generation boat builder, and he was fiercely proud of the Fujiwara legacy of boat building. You know, he had tools of his father and his grandfather. And so that helped me. Now, actually raising the issue of the fact that I had multiple teachers, this is very interesting. Some may disagree with me. I think it would have been impossible, or at least exponentially harder for a native Japanese to do what I did. Because in Japan, one is not supposed to have more than one teacher. You are to study with one master. And I mean, if they were to die prematurely or something like that, yes, you could go find another master. But if you go through an apprenticeship and emerge as a mature craftsperson, you keep a fealty to your teacher. You don't go find another one. And I have to say that some of my teachers did have a difficult time with the fact, not that I was going to share their secrets. I mean, I had told them I'm going to publish your secrets. And they were all on, except for one, they were all on board with that. What they had a hard time was that I was going to work with another boat builder. And that was particularly difficult. My Urayasu teacher and my Tokyo teacher had been competitors. And that was a very strained triangle, the three of us, that I had to negotiate. But I hope that answers the question. Yeah, that's a great question.
Wonderful. Gianfranco Chico asks, and it may be a slightly related topic, but Japanese-style teacher-apprentice learning has served the country well in the past. Today, with so many crafts at risk of disappearing, do you think they should embrace a different kind of teaching to cut down the apprenticeship period from several years to just a few?
You know, yeah, in some ways it's a very fertile time to be an apprentice in Japan, because that's what happened. Boat builders, as well as many other craftspeople, they lost a generation of apprentices. You know, my teachers all came of age at the end of the war. The country was destroyed. They had no other options but to go into their father's workshops. But by the time their sons came of age, Japan was the world's second largest economy. They could go to university, they could get a corporate job, they could move to, you know, Tokyo and work for Panasonic. That's happened across the crafts. There is a growing number of craft schools in Japan. That's a that's a very common thing in the West. That's a very, very new and novel thing in Japan. I like to tell people that in the tiny little state of Vermont, where I live, population 600,000 people, we have more woodworking schools than all of Japan. Okay, so the school model is sort of a radical new thing. I think to save boat building, I would love to create a boat building school in Japan. I think that's what is needed to save the craft. What I would also love to see, I, I just think it's tragic. There are a lot of young people that would like to study with craftspeople, but the economics are different now. 50 to 100 years ago, your master, fed you, clothed you, housed you, and gave you a small stipend at best. Um, why doesn't the Ministry of Culture offer scholarships for Japanese to support them? Because the situation now is so many craftspeople can't possibly afford an apprentice, you know? And that's it's sort of like the craft is being attacked from another angle, and so you can't even afford to keep an apprentice, and they can't afford to just work for you for nothing. And so, I mean, I have great respect for the apprentice system. It produced craftspeople of unbelievable skill and ability. um, but unfortunately, in other ways, it sort of sowed the seeds of its own destruction, because who's going to sign up for a 6-year apprenticeship, largely unpaid? So, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is something that we see across a range of the traditional Japanese craft industries, isn't it? And I know there's a lot of concerns in other ones as well, about sort of the sustainability of them, I suppose.
Right.
So there's, yeah, familiar, if somewhat depressing discussions, I think. Pernilla Rodlin has an interesting question. So she says, now Japanese companies are emphasizing reskilling for their employees. I'm beginning to worry, as this is my job, how one can teach soft skills such as managing people or marketing when the traditional view has been to see a master do these things over and over again. I use a lot of case studies in my training sessions because of this. Any other suggestions? Maybe I should get them to observe successful non-Japanese managers and steal from them.
I'll just give one technique. When I teach my university class and my workshops, what I do, I begin working. So I begin saw fitting. I don't say a thing. And I invite my students to watch and, as succinctly as possible, quietly say what they see. So they notice the angle of the saw, how fast my cadence is, where my feet are. And I just wait them out. And it's actually remarkable as a group what a completely comprehensive description of the technique they provide. I don't know if the questioner can possibly, throw the learning back on to the recipient in a way like that. But what I'm learning and what I'm trying to bring forward in my classes is doing this incredibly counterintuitive thing, taking myself, the teacher, out. Okay. And creating the environment where people can learn, because it is a more engaged learning. So that's my best advice. And if that transforms your corporation, then you owe me a cup of coffee. But
That's great.
yeah.
I'm going to pick out just a few of the other questions because we're running a little short on time. But Maurizio Borriello asks, he's got a question for you. And do they season the wood? And if they do, for how long?
So the tradition, yeah, this seems to run across the country. Japanese boat builders their planking is air dried for 1 year. So it's that Japanese cedar, except for, glad this slide is still up, the cormorant boat is made of a wood called maki, which is a denser wood that grows in Wakayama, central Japan. But in any case, Japanese cedar, it's sawn into planks, rough sawn planks, and it's air dried for 1 year. That's the standard sort of rule that every boat builder will quote you. The wood is appropriate and can be used a good deal either side of that, but that's the standard. Also, remember, Japan is a much more humid place than a lot of places in the world, so that moisture content still remains, like by American standards, where I live in New England, remains pretty high.
That's great. And in fact, Michael Spencer has a slightly related question. He says, "What are the criteria for the selection of the wood?" And he also asked if you could write down the name of the rhythm used by the boat builder, which I think was Uguisu. Yeah.
Uguisu no Tani Watari.
Yeah.
Uguisu no Tani Watari. Yeah, I mean, finding the trees is just a matter of, clear lumber. Japan has incredible old growth forests, and the cedars that it's possible to get are really extraordinary. I mean, they make an American cry, and they would make an English person weep, because the Royal Navy took care of all your wood. I know that planking stock is a hard thing to find in England. So Japan is blessed with magnificent, large, straight, clear cedar. And so, yeah, you just pick a high quality log, and that's what you get. And generally, boat builders had a relationship with a logger and had a relationship with a sawmill. So those three crafts, were working together. Yeah.
Well, that's great. And actually, that leads on really nicely to the next question, which is from Will Ricks, who says, "Fascinating talk. Douglas, thank you very much. We saw almost no machines being used. Is there a machine shop for processing the timber, or is the work entirely done by hand tools?"
So in some cases, the first two boats you saw, the tugboat and the seaweed boat, were made entirely with hand tools. I sawed the shape of every plank with a handsaw. I finished every surface with a hand plane. All the boats you saw were surfaced entirely with a hand plane. My teachers, the one power tool you saw was the bandsaw in Okinawa. My teacher was cutting out the fastenings with a bandsaw. I think that's the only bandsaw. I think that's the only stationary power tool I ever used in Japan with my teachers. So we would have a handheld circular saw and sometimes a handheld planer, but the wood would come rough from the sawmill, either a circular mill or a modern band mill. And then we might very quickly dress it with the handheld power planer, but then everything was done with the hand plane. So really 90%, 95% handwork. And my teachers, that's how they worked their whole lives. And in fact, most of my teachers didn't get electricity till the mid 1960s. So they were nearly 20 years into their careers before they ever had a power tool. So, yeah.
Well, that's amazing. Wow. So just two questions left. One is from Mina Ikimoto Ghosh, who asks, how much of the silent workshop pedagogy style is a matter of craftsman culture, and how much is an expression of Japanese masculinity of a certain generation?
I really think it's part of the craft culture. I would not, that's a real interesting observation or theory, but I wouldn't lay that at the feet of, some sort of a gender thing that it's like, you know, old Japanese kibishi shokunin, won't talk, though they can be, tend to be quiet people. No, I really think there's a strong belief. And a lot of the readings in my university class, we do a lot of readings about Zen Buddhism. because I see so many parallels between monastic Buddhist training and the way I was trained. Just throw the apprentice into the deep end and make them figure it out, and that I'm not here to help you. As I say to my university students sometimes, I refuse to save you. And there is, and you can be critical of it. In some ways, I look back at my teachers and say, it was a kind of benign neglect, our relationship in the workshop. They may have wanted me to succeed. I think they did want me to succeed, but they understood that that was for me to do, not for them to do. So I really think and I've heard enough stories from other crafts. I've just heard this kind of thing over and over again of the silent workshop, of learning by observation. That I think it's really pretty universal, and beyond Japan. I mean, in any traditional culture, I think you'd find many echoes of it.
Oh, absolutely. And the last question, Douglas, is from Edward Paul, who I'm guessing is in the States, because he's saying if somebody wanted to learn traditional Japanese boat building in the US, where should they go?
Well, my next workshop is next May at Colorado State University. So get in touch with me, douglasbrooksboatbuilding.com, and you can email me from my website. If you can't remember that website address, just Google Japanese wooden boats and you'll find me. And stay in touch. I'm always looking for venues for workshops. And I'm gonna be teaching a Japanese plane making, kanna making workshop in Philadelphia in September, and I'm doing a demo in Kingston, New York in October. So just reach out to me and let's think about Colorado next spring, or find me a venue where you are and we can put a workshop together. Or yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. And there's been some nice expressions of thanks in the chat as well. Chris Foy says, inspiring and illuminating. And Philip Ebrel says, wonderful talk. Hope to see Douglas in the UK someday. So I think, Douglas, we must have a chat about what we can do in terms of putting one of those workshops together, because I think it would be fabulous. I think it's something the Sainsbury Institute would be very interested in developing that. Here, our suggestion from Pernil Rudlin is building a wherry. A wherry is a traditional sort of boat that we use on the Broads. I'm afraid that our time is pretty much up, but I know that everybody will want to thank you enormously for that really wonderful.
You're welcome, and thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm pleased to say that Douglas has allowed us to put a recorded version of this lecture up on our YouTube channel. And there'll also be a summary of the talk in our next e-bulletin, which is scheduled to come out in early July. You'll be receiving an email with a link to our feedback form, which will also appear in your browser after this session. We're really grateful for any comments you provide, which allow us to continually enhance and improve our lecture series. Our next Third Thursday lecture, which ties in with our July exhibitions and events mentioned that I touched on at the beginning of the talk, will feature Dr. Akiko Yano from the Department of Asia at the British Museum. The lecture will be on Thursday, the 18th of July, and it will discuss the current exhibition at the British Museum, City Life and Salon Culture in Kyoto and Osaka, 1770 to 1900. And that's in relation to the Tanzaku exhibition that we'll be hosting at Norwich's Shoe Factory. This will be a hybrid lecture, so I very much hope that our local audience will be able to join us in person. We'll be back in the Cathedral Hostelry, where we haven't been for a little while. And for those further afield, we'll also be making it online via Zoom as usual. Our Third Thursday lecture series have been running since 2001, hard to believe, and they are greatly supported by our funders, Yakult UK, the Great Britain Sasakawa Foundation, and the Gatsby Charitable Foundation. And the Sainsbury Institute, all of us at the Sainsbury Institute, wish to thank our funders and you, our wonderful audience, for supporting this lecture series. So with a final thank you to Douglas, thank you very much indeed for listening in tonight, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon. Thank you and good night.